Welcome back to Conversations with Karen and Kat. And I'm Karen Scott Green.
And I'm Kat Hardrick.
And we are here today with Josiah Johnson. And Josiah is the director of A Boy with the Ball. Mm-hmm. I got that wrong. That is not your position.
Development director.
Development director.
Okay.
Okay. And so I met Josiah at a Chamber of Commerce meeting a few months back, and started talking to him, and he was telling me about his organization. And I went to his fundraiser, and I was very impressed with the program. I was very impressed with the kids. And so when we started the podcast, you were one of the people who I thought about wanting to interview, because we want to interview people who are actually on the ground doing the work.
That's right.
In the community, like working with kids, working with veterans that are just doing the work. And so that's what I wanted. That's why I wanted you on. You look terrified. It's going to be easy, I promise you. Because this is just a conversation. Because you had started talking a little bit earlier about your background and about what you're doing with A Boy with the Ball. And I was like, save it, because it's all good. First off, Josiah, tell us a little bit about your background, like how you grew up, and, because that's an interesting story too.
Yeah, I'll first off, thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be with you guys and excited for my muffin. It was great when I met you at that chamber event. I said, it'd be awesome if you came to this event, but even past that, even past whether you get elected or not, just knowing you and hearing about the passions you had. And we had gone to a conversation about the juvenile justice system, which is something that we run into a lot on the mediation side of it. And so then hearing about somebody who was more on the legal side of it, there was kindred spirit. So, so I'm happy to be here. Josiah Johnson is my birth name, and I was actually born in Decatur, Georgia.
Oh, really? Decatur's greater.
Yeah, Decatur's greater. I was born at, now it's Emory, but it was DeKalb Med when I was born there. And then my family grew up, we lived in Norcross when I first was here. And then we moved to San Antonio when I was about probably a year old and lived there for a bit. And then my mom is Costa Rican. My dad is a white guy from Arizona. And so I always say I came out on the paler side. And then
But you spent some time in Costa Rica.
And so then when I was 6 years old, we moved to Costa Rica to be around family and to sort of pursue some of the dreams that they had. And so I grew up there. I always say culturally, I probably identify as Costa Rican far more than that. If you see kind of my demeanor, it's the slower pace. It's the more relaxed. It's the work to live.
You got the island vibe.
Yeah, so it's more of a beach culture vibe. And so that's the temperament I kind of grew up with. We moved back to the U.S. when I was 12, back to San Antonio, and then came to Georgia when I was 15. So,
and you are one of how many?
I'm one of three. I'm the youngest of three. So I've got an older sister who's actually really involved with Boy with the Ball as a volunteer, and then I've got an oldest brother, which is a nuclear scientist. So it's
he has an easy job.
So he got out easy. He went the easy road. But so then I got involved with Boy with the Ball.
So tell us, what is Boy with the Ball?
Yeah, Boy with the Ball. So Boy with the Ball now we just finished our 20th year. We're in our 21st year of existing. It actually started in San Antonio, Texas, which is how I know a lot of the organization. And I grew up actually around a lot of the team. They were all family friends of mine. And Boy with the Ball really grew out of the idea of how do you build sustainable ways to reach at-risk young people. And what Boy with the Ball was noticing was there was two typical approaches to how do you reach at-risk young people. One is you have these Mother Teresa style characters who give their lives for young people, and that's what it takes, is giving your life for a young person. But the hard thing about when it's based around an individual, that individual will retire at some point or pass away, and then the work
dies. Yeah.
The other model we were finding were these place-based models, like a YMCA or a Boys and Girls Club, where it's drawing people to an area. The hard thing is there's a lot of at-risk young people that will never step into those buildings.
That's right.
If you are at a certain level of involved in sort of at-risk behaviors, the idea of you having to go for the help versus the help having to come and save you out of the things that you're involved in.
And there's also an issue of access.
And there's issues with access. There's also issues with just not knowing about the resources that exist, or could I get in on that? And especially as we're dealing a lot here in Norcross around immigration, a lot of immigrant children, there's a general fear of, I don't want to go out in public. Do I have the right to go into that? Like, is it something that as somebody who is not a naturalized citizen, can I get involved in stuff like that? So then there's the idea was, what if you built a team-based approach where you're equipping young people to then turn and be leaders themselves?
Okay, that's a good idea.
I'll say quickly, just because people ask about the name Boy at the Ball, where did it come from? And it really came from, as we were starting, one of the children of the guys who was really involved with the group had a little 3-year-old boy, and he carried around this red kickball like a security object, like Linus's blanket. But he didn't play with it. He just carried it everywhere. He would go to sleep with it. He would take it to church. If they were going on a road trip and they got 30 minutes into the drive and he forgot it, the family would have to turn around to go get it. It was what he had with him, and he always carried it with him. And there was one day where it fell out of his hands into his dad's hand, and his dad thought, well, I wonder if he can play catch. So he tried to bounce it to him. He had a little bit of a tummy, so he thought if I bounce it to him, then it could absorb into his stomach. And the kid caught it, and there was this epiphany of, I've been carrying around this ball for all these years, and I never knew that it could do this. And so we say young people have these lives in their hands, and they have all this talent, all this ambition, all this zeal and energy, but sometimes it takes somebody coming alongside you to say, hey, what if you could do this with it? And so a lot of what Boy at the Ball, hey, it's not a sports organization, and it's not, we work with as many girls as we do with boys. And it's...
Because I thought you were raising money for sports. That's what I initially thought.
Really? Before I got, because of the name?
Yeah.
It's got us in trouble sometimes.
I thought you were raising money for sports.
Yeah, so then I'll say just some historical stuff for Boy at the Ball. Started in 2001, and we really do multiple methods of community intervention, but we launched into Costa Rica actually in 2004. And was
that because of you?
So that was because my family was really involved with the launch of it. And then in 2008, there was a group of students that we had gotten connected with in Nicaragua, and so we expanded into Nicaragua. As we were growing into all these cities, we were recognizing there would need to be a global organization that would help. If we were going to keep expanding, how do we keep caring for all the teams that are going to be growing? So there was the launch of the global organization in 2009. In 2013, we came to Atlanta, and this is where actually our global headquarters is. So I wear 2 hats. I work both for the local side, and I'm also on calls with all the teams and helping them distinctly with their fundraising and how do they involve community partners, but also just checking in on them. How are you guys doing? How's your families? And then we launched in 2014 into Nigeria and Kenya. And then in 2017 up into Boston. And really that's time we sort of started to realize that we needed systems in place. If we were going to keep growing this dramatically, you can send a lot of really incredible leaders out in the field, but they need some level of how are they being cared for? How do they know how to raise funds? How do they know how to build relationships? So Boy with the Ball in Atlanta
needs to be doing the same things same kind of systems as Boy with the Ball in Costa Rica.
And so we did a lot in that moment of how do you establish Boy with the Ball in Atlanta is actually what we call our flagship organization. So when we're launching new teams, we bring the leaders of that team here for 3 months to kind of observe, to watch it, to say, hey, this is how we do it. These are the how do you engage your Rotary clubs, your chambers of commerce, your National Honor Societies at high schools, which are really incredible volunteer forces, college campuses, and young people have older people have money to give, young people have time to give. And so how do you leverage what the resources that are inherent to a community? I can keep going. But
So
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. What actually drove you to participate? What catalyst did you into this?
Yeah, so I'll get into the specifics about what Boy with the Ball does in a second. I think I grew up around a lot of people, and I knew a lot of the people.
Okay.
When I was in college, I was volunteering a little bit, and I got to know a girl who was interning with Boy with the Ball, who is now my wife.
Get out of here. Is it Molly?
Molly, yes.
Okay.
And so she was getting really involved, and it was a transformative thing to her. She thought Boy with the Ball. Boy with the Ball does a good job of, it's both going out to develop the kids that we're working with, but we also say for kids who are coming to volunteer, this is as developmental for you as it is for any of the kids that you're going to provide mentoring or tutoring or care for. How do you do at going outside of yourself into caring for someone else is really crucial. And so we got really involved because we thought, first off, it was helpful for us. Like, we thought it was developing us as leaders, and it was putting us in these situations where we got to go out and fight and love a kid that that it was actually exposing some of the places where there was immaturity or there was there's it's very easy to be egocentric, especially when you're young, though I would say probably for all ages. And so working that out, we thought that was fun. It felt like it was a gym for your relational muscles. And so that's actually a lot of where you see we get a lot of college students involved, because it becomes really exciting to them, the idea that you could grow in your capacity to care and to fight for people. Boy the Ball then does a good job of then releasing young people around where their giftings are. We have one guy who, like our audio technician here, has a videography and audio technician company. And so now he's been working with some of the kids that were in building an apprenticeship program for kids in the community who want to come in and get into how do you function as an audio engineer for podcasting? How do you develop basic Photoshop skills or even some graphic animation, which first off, kids who get in that are going to have wildly lucrative careers. But second off, it's for Rocky, it's actually beneficial for him as he's starting a small business that he's getting some of these kids as they're 14, 15, 16. When they're 18, that's a pipeline of employees for him at some point that could be really beneficial. And by getting them so young, they're malleable. They can learn the company culture. They can learn the work ethic that he's looking for, the work pacing that he's looking for. So for the specifics of what Boy with the Ball does, I thought this is probably helpful to say. So Boy with the Ball really, the key program that we do is called Love Your City. Velocity is actually a subsidiary program under Love Your City.
And I was at fundraiser for Velocity.
Which is our school-based mentoring program. Love Your City, Velocity isn't done at every team across the world. Love Your City is done. That is to us our DNA piece.
So now what is Love Your City?
Yeah. So Love Your City, I'll say it in the context of Costa Rica, which is we started doing it when Boy with the Ball started in 2001, but I would say it really took shape in science. And in 2004, as we started working in Costa Rica, we worked in a squatter settlement of 3,000 Nicaraguan immigrants living on 2 acres of land. It was called...
How many people living on 2 acres?
3,000.
Oh my God.
Squatter on 2 acres of land. So they were living in largely what would probably be described as a shanty town. And there are these tin huts that are kind of been MacGyvered together. And it's largely Nicaraguan immigrants that got pushed down in the 90s. There was the large earthquake, and then there was the series of revolutions and political upheaval that's led to a large amount of immigration into Costa Rica. And so what we do, Love Your City, the way it works is, first off, there's a strong group of a team that's passionate about the idea of how do you reach young people. And so that exists in every country. Here we meet on Friday nights. We talk, hey, what's happening in the community? What are you guys seeing? The next thing that we do is we pick a community, and you want it to be, we use the term at-risk community. A lot of people would probably take that to mean under-resourced. And so...
I like that, under-resourced.
We wouldn't even say it's that it's a struggling community.
Yeah.
It's just a community that's missing the resources
Yeah.
That
that's
doesn't
needed.
have access, and that's probably a lot of the problem, right?
And so in Costa Rica, that community, we do what's called ethnographic research, where we go to the police stations, to the municipal leaders, to the church leaders who have a lot of insight on where is it hardest for kids to go from childhood to adulthood successfully.
Right.
And they help us identify a community. And so that community is called El Triángulo La Solidaridad, which means the triangle of solidarity in Spanish. And as we go in, we mobilize in large groups of volunteers that come from three main sources: from schools and colleges, from churches, a lot of churches that are looking for how do they be impactful and do some of this loving your neighbor nonsense that we all talk about. But then also corporations and CSR departments, mobilizing businesses into not just consuming from the community, but also having consequence in the community.
That's very
And so then as we mobilize, we go into a community and we get to know every resident. And it looks kind of, at the beginning, you guys understand this because you guys have now gone into an election. And so you knock on the doors and you just say, hey, my name's Josiah Johnson. I work with a group called Boy at the Ball. It's focused on seeing young people reach their dreams. I have two questions. One is, what are you seeing young people in your community face? And number two, would you be our friend? And a lot of times you hear people say, is it weird to knock on someone's door? And we say, maybe the first time, but by the fifth time, they know you. By the 50th time, they've come to expect you. By the 500th time, they have coffee ready for you because they're expecting you. And so in the process of it, you first off, at the very beginning, you do get some closed doors, and then you do get an older woman that says, hey, it's down at that corner where the gang come and they recruit. And it's largely because the kids are bored because their parents are having to work so much.
So in Atlanta, what's the area that you identified in Atlanta?
So we used to, when we first actually arrived in Atlanta in 2013, we were working over in Bankhead over on the west side of Atlanta. We then got moved, Ann Kramer, who's kind of the Mary Poppins of the nonprofit industry in Atlanta, said, hey, we need you up in Gwinnett because the diversity that Gwinnett's facing, there's not been a group that's really solves that issue. And so we work in a community in Norcross, Georgia. That's off Jimmy Carter and Singleton Road. And it's actually two apartment complexes that share one leasing office. And it's 272 units with 1,200 residents. And it's a largely Hispanic immigrant population. And so in that area, gangs were really prevalent. Nothing major with drugs, but then a high amount of crime. The big statistic was that in 2017, when we launched into that community, there was 111 reported cases of crime. 111 reported cases of crime in the 1 year within that one
community. In those two apartment buildings. That's a lot for two apartments.
It's a lot. So,
and the age of the crime was
it's largely teenage and young people. It's a lot of people who are just bored. It's a lot of getting into but then also there's domestic abuse and pieces happening where partially because alcoholism is such a cheap numbing factor that you can take that it then leads to
mechanism for both.
It leads to a lot of then crime that then is ultimately damaging not just to the people involved but then to the families and to the community. So then as we go into the community, we start to identify where are the recurring problems. And then we start to then do two things. One, we look for mentoring dynamics. Who are young people that are excited about being leaders in their own community? The great thing about young people and about people who live in the community being leaders is I can be so involved in the community, but I also have to go to my family. I have to go home.
You don't live there.
I don't live there. But if you have people who are within the community who are then taking ownership of the community, they're there all the time. We're building a community center in Costa Rica that would function as our tutoring center. And there was a moment where some of the gang guys came and were starting to steal some of the bricks. And this woman came out and just started grabbing the bricks and throwing at them. And I was like, do you not realize that you're stealing from yourself when you do this? And having somebody there who's there all the time. And then we came into the community and said, hey, you guys need to get down to that building. They lost their child last night. And people that are in the community, that are seeing the community, helping us know it, because they're going to know their community.
And they're identifying the need. So rather than a boy with a ball coming in and acting like the saviors, you're identifying the need because the community is telling you what the need is. And you're partnering with the community to
find the leadership within the community, from the community, so that they can help mold themselves.
The beauty of Love Your City is how adaptive it is and how relationally fluid it is. What a kid in Udi in Nigeria needs is totally different than what a kid in Dorchester up in Boston needs, and what an immigrant kid here in Norcross needs. And so the way that we have to then deal with the programming is based off that. In Costa Rica, we were in a community where the average education for the whole community was at a 3rd grade level, and nobody in the community had ever graduated from high school. And what we were realizing is that it's because school supplies on average cost $100 per year per student. And so for a family, the average income in the community was $200 a month.
So they would spend half a month's salary on
school supplies.
Just on school supplies. And so if you have one kid, you can make it happen. If you have 2 kids, it's tough, but you can plan for it. But once you get to a 3rd kid, that's where then all of a sudden the oldest kid is pulling himself out of school and picking up a motorcycle to taxi people around and help with the income for the family. And so what we did was we got to know the Lincoln High School is a great high school in Costa Rica. It's a private school. It's where all the president's kids go. And we were on a flight one time with their principal, and he said, "Hey, what do you guys do?" And we said, "Well, we work with at-risk kids." And he said, "Well, why aren't you working with my kids?" And then we said, "Jack, your kids are the president's kids." And he said, "I think you're being short-sighted." He said, "Our kids are raised by their maids. They live behind gates. Their parents are socialites." He said, "We're reaching their heads. No one's reaching their hearts. They're at risk of being the next generation of corrupt politicians." And so he said, "Would you guys get involved?" And so what we started doing is we built, first off, a club in their school that was based around service and leadership. But then on every Saturday, they would come out to the community and serve within the community. And one of the girls there named Gloria Soho, who now works at the UN, and she had a real raspy voice. She said, "Hey, we're a bunch of kids that have extra time and high academics. Could we start a tutoring center for the kids?"
And how old was she?
At the time, Gloria was probably 15, 16.
Wow, that's awesome. She stepped up.
And so then the kids from that school would come and provide tutoring, to the point where then academics were we were recognizing the issue with the school supplies. So we started working with Western Union. They started providing backpacks for the kids. And so we built a whole system that was around the idea. If you took one of the backpacks with the school supplies, you were agreeing that you had to then submit your report cards to us. And if your report cards ever dipped below a B, you had to be at the tutoring center every week if you wanted to get a backpack.
Now that's a good incentive instead of giving people money.
And so then it started to grow, and we started recognizing, started to actually see, there was a girl named Raquel who was the first girl to graduate in that community. And so then we talked to Western Union and said, "We've had an incredible success. We have a girl that's graduating. She doesn't know how she'll go to school." And they said, "What if we provided a scholarship that then they can take the money and we'll pay for their schooling, but they have to agree to once a month go back to their own community and provide tutoring, creating a cycle of leadership."
That's right.
And then the crazy thing is, and this was all probably in 2008, 2009, is if they then finished their degree and were serving the full time, they were guaranteed an entry level position within Western Union. Now there are 21 junior executives in Western Union and Costa Rica that are from that squatter settlement in Costa Rica. In a community where no one had graduated in high school since 2008, it became the norm to graduate from school.
So what are some of because what we definitely want to do is make sure that we deposit a lot of information so other people can plug in. So what is it that you overcame in this whole process? You tied in Nicaragua, Africa, Costa Rica. What is it that you overcame so that other people can learn from your experience?
Well, so I think what we found is being open to finding really active partners, and also being really open to letting go of partners that aren't actually in it. I think we deal with this actually at Gwinnett, especially within the nonprofit world, is actually very cutthroat in some ways. And it's not as synergistic as you would hope it would be. We've been in moments where we've been in meetings with like the Buffett family in Colorado, and they'll bring everyone together, and everyone's so open-handed. We haven't quite found that here in Gwinnett. Some of it's that there's such division among leadership across the county. You guys know this better than anyone, but as people who really know our community, but in 1970, Gwinnett County was 90,000 predominantly white people. Now it's 900,000 people speaking over 100 languages, with 400,000 more to come in the next 10 years. And so sometimes we see our leadership is an older generation who, I don't think their hearts are in the wrong place, but it's that they are functioning off a playbook of where our country is.
That's 20 years ago.
Way in the past. Where now what's happening and the solutions we're going to need are 21st century solutions. And so what we found is then there's a lot of groups that are in it for the simple answer, but then the problem is dealt with more within the complexities of things. So looking for who are the great partners that are not just interested in a good PR stunt, but in deep solutions that are long-term. Velocity is the program that you went to. I'll say real quickly, Velocity is
a banquet, huh?
And it was a great one.
You have to tell everybody about Velocity, because that's what got me here. So Velocity is our school-based program. It's actually designed by this man who looks a lot like Kelsey Grammer from Frasier. His name is Dr. Michael Karcher, and he's a brilliant. He co-authored the book on youth mentoring, and he's viewed as the world-leading youth mentoring expert. And he wrote this program called that was a cross-age mentoring program. So he called it Camp Cross-Age Mentoring Program, which we then took and nicknamed it Velocity because camp wasn't exciting to our kids. And we launched it in a Dropout Factory High School in San Antonio, Texas, which it was a 50% graduation rate at this high school. And the concept of the program is, what if you could train high school students to then be mentors to middle school students? What we have found is with mentoring programs where you bring in business leaders is that it's great that you would get business leaders and adults from the community. And a lot of that is great, but because you are not wanting to lose that volunteer, you're not always able to put rigor on that mentor of saying, hey, how do you know what you're doing is actually effective with the mentee? Because then if you're just a business person and you have the option of, I'm going to back out, this is too much work. But if you take young people, you can put wild amounts of rigor on them and say, hey, we watched you. You were in your phone last week. You weren't it seems like you were discouraging him from talking to his family. You can't do that. The levels of rigor you're able to put on young people is huge. And so we go into high schools and we recruit a large group of mentors, and then they're paired with mentees. We do it through what we call a natural pairing, where they get 2 weeks where they just go in and they all get to do different icebreaker games. And it's very fun. To work with young people, it has to be fun. And so they get to know each other, and at the end they all write down their top 3 choices for mentors and their top 3 choices for mentees. And about 90% of the time they get somebody on their list, which makes sense. You typically like the people who like you.
That's right.
And which high schools are you at?
Here in Gwinnett, we work in Dyad. So Berkmar High School mentors Berkmar Middle School. Central Gwinnett High School, which is right here around the corner, mentors Moore Middle School. We've been asked by the district if we would consider expanding into the next school.
Shiloh High School, Shiloh,
Meadow Creek. There's a lot of these that I always end up telling them if they want us to grow, they're going to have to help us fundraise.
That's going to be my next question. How do you build those relationships and get in those schools? Because you're at those now, but we have so many more in Gwinnett.
I mean, it's generally pretty natural. It's generally pretty natural for us of we know somebody who gets us in. When it came to the case of Berkmar, one of our board members knew somebody there, and we got there and their school administrators had tears in their eyes just saying, our teachers are having to teach across 10 languages in one classroom. They can't do it. We need help. And so that was a natural one. Out of that, we knew people at Central Gwinnett, and they invited us in during the pandemic. They were facing some staggering statistics around their freshman class that brought us in. And so it's a lot of times natural relationship. Now we actually, because there's some more credibility with us within the school administrators, they're actually helping us. So they're saying schools like, schools like Collins Hill, which have been historically pretty fine schools, but they're starting to see negative statistics that it's starting. So could they inject us in before the downfall and see if that would function preventative?
I was going to ask you, thank you for saying about Collins Hill. So my question to you is, how can organizations or volunteers, churches, how can everyone get in contact with you to try to partner with you to bring what you're doing to their communities, or even help fundraise, donate?
Well, first off, you can go to our website. Our website, it's a really beautiful website. We put a lot of work into it over the last few years, so please go see it. I would say there's all kinds of ways. If you're here,
what's the website?
www.boytheball.com. And if you're interested in getting involved as a volunteer, you can reach out saying, hey, I'd love to come volunteer, and we'd love to have you there. For Love Your City, you can come one time and on a Saturday morning, and that's a huge difference. You're part of the history of what happened. Some people will come and they'll then come monthly. Some people will be like my wife and I when we first got involved and build it into our schedule. It's part of our Saturday routine. The beauty of Love Your City here is there's what's happening on Saturday, but then there's even more. There's a boys and girls group that meets throughout the week. It was originally just a boys group, but then the girls got really upset in the community that there wasn't a group for them.
Partially,
and so then we had to launch a girls group that had functions at the exact same time, because if not, the girls were just going to come to ours anyway. And then there's things like ESL classes for parents who would love to engage in their kids' education but are missing some of the cultural language skills to do it. There's things like apprenticeship programs. There's all kinds of things going on throughout the week that people can get involved with, but we always say come and get involved first on Saturday, get a feel for the community, and then you can come and participate more fully. Velocity is happening on Wednesdays and Thursdays. Right now we're on summer break, so we've actually pulled a lot of our mentors to come help us with the Love Your City initiative. We'll actually have a picnic with some of our Velocity kids downtown at the square tomorrow. But we on Wednesdays and Thursdays, people are welcome to come and get involved. We do ask that people who want to volunteer with Velocity that they get involved for a semester at a time. Just because there's some level of building the team and the camaraderie
and making a commitment.
And
that person's
because
going to be
it's
there.
within a school, we do have to do a heavier amount of background checks.
I was just about to ask that, because other places I volunteer with, so you do have to have some background.
Because it's within a school, that's a heavier background check. So that one, we try to make it where if we're going to do that level of investment, to make sure that it's somebody who's going to be around for a little. If you're interested in seeing it grow into your school or into your community, first off, reach out to us. We would love to just set up a meeting. What we would say is if you want us to come, help fight for us in it, help champion us. Who's your network? Who do you know? Who are the people that we need to know within that community? The school administrators. If you know foundations in the area that would be willing to help seed fund it, that's wonderful. If you're interested in giving, you can for sure do it on the website. One of the things that we're really pushing for this year is the idea of people having personal fundraisers. And you see this on Facebook. We've even seen it where we have some friends who their kids do a lemonade stand and they just donate the proceeds of it. But seeing people then create these Love Your City dynamics, we say there's lack of integrity if we're all just going to go love this one community. If you're not bringing it to your own community, there's lack of integrity to it. So how do you do things within your own community that are first helping raise funds, but then B, that are bringing your own community together? Each of our communities need care and love as much as any of these. So then you can give for sure, but then also if you're willing to make a birthday fundraiser on Facebook, if you're to host a wine and cheese or an information lunch, and we'll come in and we'll come speak for a quick second, and we won't be cumbersome.
Take up the whole time.
And it helps us get to know people. Your people's connections are as valuable as their funding for us. It's finding people, like we were talking about, key partners that are willing to fight for us, but So finding people who are willing to fight for us within a fuller extent to see the work that we're done grow across the county.
That's right.
Some things I would just say, the 111 crimes that there were in 2017 in that community, in 2020 there were 0 reported cases of crime in the community.
Get out of here.
Within Velocity, we've done it in schools where the average graduation rate is around 68%. But within the samples that we've done it, we've had a 100% graduation rate and a 95% college matriculation rate. We've seen things like the school overall graduation rate drastically increases in the time that we're there. And actually at Berkmar, we've been there now so long that this last year was the first year where we have mentors who started as 6th grade mentees.
Get out of here.
And they're now 9th grade mentors. And then past that, we have now...
I met some of those kids.
We try to have college kids that come around, and we like to have one volunteer for every 6 kids there. And we have recruit college kids that will pour into the mentors who will then pour into the mentees. And this year we had kids who had graduated and are down at Georgia State or at GGC or at UGA that would drive over every week to then go and care for these kids because it was so meaningful to them.
Wow. We can talk to you all day.
I'm a talker. So.
Yeah, but you have a lot of good things to say, and that's what we need.
You see why I was so excited?
Yeah.
Because I want more people to know about A Boy with the Ball, and hopefully other people will see this and think, how can I get this in my community?
That's right.
That there is a need. And so if someone is interested in bringing it into their community, who would they contact? Would they contact you directly, or
you can? There's an info. There's an info one, and you can send it. And actually, people sometimes I think by filling out these generic waivers that aren't to a specific email that it's just going to be lost to the ether. It's actually the opposite. It goes to what happens is it then gets sent to everyone on our staff's email.
Okay. So more than you see it,
and so we will all see it, and then it will come up in our staff meeting, and we'll say, "Hey, this seems like a great opportunity. Let's schedule something with them." And so that's actually, I'll say just some exciting things, and then I'll let you guys keep going in it. But one of our big senses over the last year is that we have a mandate to grow. We have found a solution that is helpful to young people and seeing them rise. Past even just seeing them rise, it helps their whole families. We always say it's actually more damaging to try to help a young person if you don't involve their family.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
And family has to have buy-in.
You have to have a support system.
The University of Miami calls it family joining, which is we come into the family and say, we're here to support you guys. You guys are the superstars in your kids' lives. If anything we're doing is hurting the family, you tell us, and we will we'll back out of it, or we'll back out of the whole play. And so we actually, in the process, see a lot of parents get really meaningfully involved. But in the mandate for growth that we're recognizing is we have found a solution that's helpful. And so how could we not push to see it reach as many young people, as many communities, as many hurting families? And so we're continuing to look now to grow. Over the last 3 years, we've really invested in our back channel systems of how do we do global management? How do we do multi-site management? How do we build trainings for teams that are going to launch? And so in this next year, we're looking at seeing teams launch into Lebanon and to Ethiopia, which are both politically tenuous places. So we're praying and we're watching and just sort of getting to know the leadership in the area. But then also have had people that are really pushing us to cities in Egypt and Palestine, and even in various parts of the U.S., including California and Chicago and Miami. And so we're continuing to grow. Obviously, to grow, we'll need more support, more care, more funding, more relationships and friendships, and people who will pray for us and talk to us. And guide us. So
love that.
Awesome.
I love that. Thank you,
so much.
Josiah, for taking the time to sit down with us and break bread, even though you didn't break yours. At Conversations with Karen and Kat, we want to have conversations that are going to inform and inspire the community to just become engaged and to move from where they are.
That's right.
That's our purpose. That's our goal.
And you help do that.
Well, thank you guys. You guys are key community leaders, so it's great to have you guys. First off, fighting for groups like us and knowing us, and but then also just to know that you guys and the woman that you are and what you're doing for the community, it's all awesome.
Thank you.
We appreciate that.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Conversations with Karen and Kat,
where we are impacting the world one conversation at a time.